Good evening. I'm Michael Morrissey, and I'd like to welcome you all. In addition to being a district attorney, I'm also a native son of Quincy, and I have seen a flourishing and diverse community grow over the years. One of the first lessons I learned in government is it's important for our elected and appointed officials to listen to people, learn from people, and support those they were chosen to represent. The panelists tonight will be very brief, I will be too, in telling you who they are and sharing something about their place in this discussion. But we hope that the core of tonight will be questions and answers with you who are attending. I'm told you can type a question into the question box at any time during the discussion. We want to listen to you, we want to hear what you have to say, and we want to provide answers to the questions you may have. We began planning this event weeks before the unimaginable events and violence in Atlanta. That news only serves to reinforce how important it is to be having face-to-face discussions like this. Some of my friends on this panel have made the point that sometimes Asian Americans may be hesitant to come to government in law enforcement with their concerns and problems. That is why tonight we have come to you. We want you to know that we are here to help. During my time as district attorney, we have prosecuted cases of anti-Asian civil rights violations, and we would do so whenever we have evidence to support those charges. We have provided training, including to our school resource officers, on dealing with bias and hate in our schools. We have partnered with many of the people you'll be hearing from next. There has never been an Asian American member of the Massachusetts legislature before my friend Tackey was elected 10 years ago. Philip Chong, the CEO of Quincy Asian Resources, has been a friend and an excellent partner for the district attorney's office for many years. Grace Lee served as a civil rights prosecutor for the Norfolk district attorney's office early in her career and is currently a member of the Asian Task Force on Domestic Violence and a past chair of the Mass Asian Commission. Peter Tilley is the assistant district attorney who now holds the title of chief civil rights prosecutor in the district attorney's office. In addition to being the police chief in Dover, Peter McGowan is also the president of the Norfolk County Chiefs of Police, and he's an executive board member of the Mass Chiefs of Police Association. Jack Plucky is the chief of the Wellesley Police Department, and Needham Police Chief John Shetler is also with us as a panelist. Paul Keenan is the chief of police in the city of Quincy, the county's largest population center and the largest population of Asian Americans. And Brookline Chief Mark Morgan, who represents a very diverse and vibrant community, is here as well. Now, Philip, if you'd be willing to speak briefly about QARI and then to introduce the panel members one by one, I'd be glad to pass this on to you, and my friends know that I'll try to be brief, and they wrote it down so I would be. So thank you all for your patience. So Philip, you're up.
Thank you, Dave Morrissey. So some background about QARI here. QARI's work has been providing wraparound immigrant social services to the Asian community in Quincy and Greater South Shore area for the last 20 years. So with over 30% of the Asian population in Quincy, our mission is dedicated to providing services and programs that are culturally and linguistically competent. We build trust with our clients with an open door policy in which they can come to us with any questions and help. And many newcomers to the city would first come to us for support such as their children's school registration, finding doctors, public housing applications, elder services, or finding jobs. Like many of us, they came to this country to pursue the American dream. They are hardworking and care about their family, their children, and their children's education. As an Asian American and immigrant myself, I also know in our culture that we are taught silence is golden, and not to be a troublemaker by speaking up or voicing our opinions and feelings. Before the pandemic, I often received emails calling us as Asian invasion, accusing us of bringing negatives to the community, including disease, stealing jobs, and basically ruining this country. And it got worse since the start of the pandemic. As we saw with the horrific violence in Atlanta last week, this confirms many of the fears that have been growing within the Asian community. We know there's anti-Asian racism in this country. We all here have faced racial harassment, bullying, and we know this is un-American and this is not why we came to this country. As D.A. Morrissey said, there's also discomfort and hesitancy in speaking to government officials about racism and anti-Asian violence. But we are here tonight because our voices and opinions need to be heard, understood, and part of the conversation. Since we announced the forum, we got a lot of support, questions, concerns, and stories that many of you want to share with the community tonight. I want to thank everyone here for supporting each other, to be patient with each other and not to judge, and with the open mind to listen. So now I would like to introduce our next speaker, Grace Lee, former Chief Civil Rights Prosecutor for the Norfolk District Attorney Office. She's also currently a board member of the Asian Task Force on Domestic Violence and also past chair of Massachusetts Asian Commission. Grace?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Philip. Thank you, District Attorney Morrissey, and thank you everybody for participating. I wanted to share some insight from my personal experiences as well as my professional experience, and I will out myself in age. In the 90s, I lived through the LA riots. I'm originally from Los Angeles, so I came into civil rights with a very traumatic backdrop and experience. So with that backdrop, I started at the Norfolk County DA's office as a prosecutor and subsequently worked my way up to chief of the hate crimes division. In doing that, it was in the context of recognizing that, anti-Asian sentiment, well, I lived through it through the LA riots, and that might have been kind of an apex. By no means did it start there. Anti-Asian sentiment has been around since the 1800s. Back in the 1800s, the Chinese came over and built the transcontinental railroads, and they worked with their Irish brothers. And I have to say that's poignant because it's the 1800s. So we've had Asians in the United States since the 1800s, and yet the stereotypes are still projected that it's the perpetual foreigner. We have immigrants from all walks of life, but Asians are continually demonized and kind of ostracized as being foreigners. In the 1800s, you had the Chinese Exclusionary Act. After the Chinese Exclusionary Act during World War II, you had the Japanese internment camp. Even when the issue of race comes up, Asian Americans are often left out. Part of that is the model minority myth, which has been used to actually to continually ostracize and disenfranchise Asian Americans. Not everybody goes to Harvard. Not everybody lives in a multi-million-dollar house. The timing of Bling Empire just couldn't be worse. You have a very diverse population of Asian Americans. During World War II, ironically, you had the US Supreme Court established the seminal case, which is still good law today, that establishes the legal basis for race-based analysis. It's US versus Korematsu. As you guys may know, when there's any state action, it's on the basis of race, it's subject to strict scrutiny. However, when the issue of race comes up, Asians are often left out of that dialogue. Not only do you have Asian Americans that, obviously were subjected to the Japanese internment camps, you also had the first mass demonstration of civil disobedience in 1940. During World War II, while we had the 142nd Infantry Regiment being the most decorated in US history during World War II, we also had conscientious objectors refusing to be drafted until their constitutional rights were reinstated because they had their family members and them themselves were detained and incarcerated in internment camps. They challenged this throughout the West Coast, California, Oregon, Wyoming, Washington, and some of these young men, you had up to 300 young men exercising their civil rights. During that time, every one of them were convicted. Some spent as little as 3 months. Some spent up to 3 years in jail for exercising their constitutional rights. Subsequently, those sentences were overturned as being unconstitutional, but nonetheless, it stands on record that whenever Asian Americans come before the court, they're perpetually seen, and these are US citizens, mind you, that exercise these civil rights, are perpetually seen as foreigners. I'm going to fast forward to the LA riots. During the LA riots, what you saw was a very complex issue. For law enforcement, the issue of race only continues to get more and more complex. You all do not have an easy job. What you saw during the LA riots is a systemic failure. And Chief Darrell Gates was the police chief back then. And I remember he walked through Koreatown, and I asked him, because I was young and boisterous back then too. And I asked him, I said, a lot of us Korean Americans feel like you fundamentally fail to protect or even engage with the Korean Americans while their community was being looted. They set up a perimeter outside and stopped at the Fairfax area. I don't know if anybody knows the Los Angeles area. And they actually refused to go in and refused to let any EMTs, fire department, or any assistants to go in. So we had people that I went to church with, a lot of the churches were in Koreatown. Actually, 14-year-old boys who'd lived charmed lives in suburbs were handed guns by their fathers saying, we need to go and protect our shop because that's our livelihood and no one's doing it for us. So in that backdrop is when I came to the DA's office, and I committed to attempting to eradicate. It's a journey, it's a lifelong journey and mission to eradicate racism. While I was a prosecutor in the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office, the irony is when I was walking with a handful of files or court files coming from court, I had a young man, teenage boy, cut me off, made me drop all my files, screaming racial epithets at me. I didn't report. Now I could have, shame on me, but I didn't. And that has to do with some of the cultural, conditioning that Asians have of, you know what, it's fine, just pick up your stuff and go to work. Fast forward, I was doing a bail argument before a particular judge, and I said, good morning, Your Honor, Grace Lee for the Commonwealth. Lee, any relation to Bruce Lee? This isn't a packed court. What my response was, oh, most respectfully, Your Honor, Bruce Lee is Chinese, I'm Korean. If I could direct your attention to the bail argument. These are examples of microaggression that continue to this day. While I was a prosecutor, while I prosecuted several cases, one of the fact patterns that stick with me the most is this Chinese family that ran a Chinese restaurant. On a Friday night, the Chinese restaurant was packed. And as you can imagine, a huge pile of fast food orders on to the side. A young man came in very inebriated, swearing and cursing, demanding to be served. The owner of the restaurant very patiently and very nicely said, I'm sorry, sir, we're busy right now, but if you just wait your turn, I'll be with you in a moment. To which his response was knocking over the entire to-go table, screaming, again with the racial epithets, go back to where you came from, et cetera, with a lot of profanity laced in. Unfortunately for this particular defendant, the owner's son was probably almost 6 feet, about 200 pounds, dragged him outside, put him in a headlock. I'm most certain that there was a little bit of a scuffle there that the son had the upper hand on, and held him there until the police apprehended him and subsequently took him into custody. When that case came to me on Monday morning, they charged that particular defendant with assault and battery, the dangerous weapon, shod foot, disorderly conduct, and left it at that. And I said, where's the civil rights violation? These police prosecutors work with them every day, salted the earth, lovely. Without hesitation, looked at me and said, no, they're not, the victims aren't Black. So I paused and I said, well, that's the wonderful thing about civil rights. We all have them. And I said, I think you need to go back and charge it as civil rights. They refused, not because they were malicious, and it really had to do with ignorance. They're like, well, I don't know. I don't think that's right. So it's ultimately, I was forced to take that charge through a clerk magistrate hearing. So for all your police chiefs, like nobody wants to do that. You got the complaint, you got to drag in all your witnesses. So out of principle, I took that case in from beginning to end through a clerk magistrate hearing to make sure that one charge of civil rights violation was included in that complaint, because I wanted to make sure people understood everyone has civil rights. And most certainly not on my watch was I going to let any individual that's been subject to a civil rights violation not be properly charged. That properly charged is different from proving the case at trial, absolutely. But the message is very powerful when you charge it. I know I'm going long, so I'm sorry. I'm going to end with a series of events. Asian Americans are subjected to a few stereotypes that are very insidious and has fed into this environment. Hate crimes. Hate crimes have increased 150% since the pandemic. Of all the hate crimes that are perpetrated, 68% are perpetrated against Asian women. The stereotypes are for women, hypersexualized or dragon woman, a dragon lady, right? So if I had a dime for every time I heard me so horny, I'd be a millionaire.
Mm.
And so for every time some Asian young lady has to be subjected to that, recognize the two are intertwined. We saw that play out in the spas in Atlanta because the sexuality and the hypersexualization of women and the racial overtones, the two are inextricably intertwined. Right now, we're at the height. We are at a pandemic of hate crimes and civil rights violations against Asian Americans. 84-year-old Thai man, 84, walking down the street. I mean, it reminded me of my father. He was literally tackled, dead. 91-year-old San Francisco, knocked unconscious. Filipino on a subway. His face was slashed from here all the way here with a box cutter. He even said, I asked for help and nobody came. I think that's gradually changing, but hopefully that does change with events like this. Even with all of this, Seattle, there was a young Japanese teacher with her white boyfriend. They were in Chinatown. Somebody, the defendant put a rock in a sock, stalked them. And I don't know if you guys have seen these videos, swung it, wheeled it, knocked it into his face, broke her nose, smashed out all her teeth. And then when her boyfriend tried to help, he proceeded to bash him in the head and he got 10 stitches there. Over this weekend, while a mother with her 7-year-old child, they were going to an anti-Asian rally. She was punched in the face after the defendant took her, Stop Asian Hate card, punched in the face, and then took off after people saw videos. Likewise, this weekend, you had someone in New York. You had a victim that was actually beat up, and I believe the words up to that was, "I'm here to F up an Asian." Another incident like that in New York where it says, you mother effer Asians, while they're pummeling. These are elderly men. And then you had a 36-year-old young man who was stabbed in the back with a kitchen knife, 8 inches. And his response was, when the police took him into custody, I didn't like the way he looked. It took a while for them to charge that particular defendant with civil rights violation. But I will stop there. And I know I took more of my time, district attorney, but I feel like, I'm sorry.
Well, you did good, Grace. Thank you so much. And thank you for sharing all the stories and your time serving the people in the community. Thank you so much. I also, before Peter Tilley, I also want to acknowledge that Rep. Denise Garlick, Rep. Bruce Ayers, and Senator Michael Rush also join us. Thank you so much for spending your evening with us here tonight. Thank you. So the next speaker, we have Peter Tilley, Assistant District Attorney, who's also the Chief Civil Rights Prosecutor for the DA office. Peter.
Thank you very much, Philip. And good evening to everybody. So I just want to give a broad overview of the kind of civil rights avenues you may have. And I think the easiest way to maybe do that is to talk about 3 places where you can go. First would be to the police. So if anybody is violating your civil rights, interfering with your living in a house, getting housing, voting rights, personal security, anything like that, go to the police. They can take out a charge, a criminal charge. Second would be assault or batteries. Somebody's hitting you because of your race, your identity, your gender, anything like that. Go to the police. They can take out a criminal charge for that as well. And a little known one on the books, but that may help as well, is the crime for destruction of a place of worship. So if anybody is, damaging a property of a place of worship, but also importantly, community center. So if, the QARI headquarters or some other community center is defaced, damaged, egged, even, you go to the police, they can take out criminal charges for something like that. Secondly, direct you to the court. And if you're being harassed multiple times over and over by the same person or group of people, you can go directly to the court and ask for a harassment prevention order. And that will hopefully stop the person from, or people from, doing that. But if it doesn't, then that's a crime. They can be charged with the crime for violating that order. And lastly, another kind of relatively unknown avenue is the Attorney General's office. They have a civil rights division, and what they can do is actually take out what's called the civil rights injunction if somebody is interfering with you exercising your civil rights of voting, going to your place of worship, housing, anything like that. They can go through that process with you and basically take out what's considered a restraining order. And if they violate that, that's a crime as well. So those are kind of the three places that I want to make sure I can direct you to, but also do want to stress the importance of documenting anything. If somebody leaves you a voicemail with slurs, if there's Facebook posts, keep all of that audio recordings, keep it. Any damage to property, or if you get hit and you have injuries, document that, take photos. Make sure you bring that with you, because that makes things through the whole court process, whether it's the court, the police, us at the DA's office, or the Attorney General's office, it makes everything that much stronger to move forward with. So make sure you document it. And thank you for listening to me, and I'm very much looking forward to listening to all of you tonight. So thank you.
Thank you, Peter. So next we have State Representative Tackey Chan, a current and lifelong resident of Quincy. He was first elected to the Massachusetts House of Representatives in 2010. State Rep Chan. Rep Chan, you need to unmute yourself.
Oh, we're gonna have to wake him up, Philip.
Sorry about that.
I think he's awake.
Sorry about that. Do I have my camera on? I can't tell how these things work. Just by doing this for months. But
No, your camera's not on
yet.
We blame on David.
Dealing with central control here. All right, well, we'll just start talking to save some time. I'm Tackey Chang, picture and no picture. And I'm the state representative from the city of Quincy. And to put in perspective, I always tell people this is not the city I grew up in. When I grew up in Quincy, there were very little people of color. I was probably the only one within probably several square miles of the city, and the first Asian to go to a public school in my neighborhood. Going to St. Anne's, I was the first one there.
I think we will give Tackey a second chance when he comes back. So why don't we first go to the Brookline Chief, Mark Morgan. Chief Morgan, you want to say a few words?
Sure. I've been a Brookline police officer for 38 years, most of that time involved with criminal investigations. I've had a lot of interaction with the AAPI community during those times as them being victims of crimes. A lot of times reluctant victims as far as coming forward with the cases. One of the things I'd like to put out today is that we enforce the theme that we want people who are victimized to come forward to the police. The Brookline community is about 17% AAPI in the community. Also, but we have 9% of our police force are also AAPI. We have officers speaking Cantonese, Mandarin, and Japanese. We'd like to get our numbers up for the police force to represent the community of 17%. That's our goal as far as, reinforcing that we want to achieve that. And also, anybody that in the community that wants to come forward, speak to those officers or any officer at all, please contact us, as soon as by 911 if you've been victimized, and we can be able to get you those resources and pursue the investigation with our civil rights officer in conjunction with the DA's office and the AG's office if needed.
Thank you, Chief Morgan. So, hey, Tackey, you're back.
Good
Go
to be
ahead.
here. I'm finally here. So I presume you can see and hear me at this point. It's hard to follow Grace Lee, put it that way. I'm Tackey Chan. I'm the state representative from Quincy. I live in the Walston neighborhood, and I grew up in the city my whole life. And I tell folks often that this is not the city I grew up in. When I was a child, we were the only people of color in the neighborhood. I knew there were other families, but we didn't know where they were. As a result, my brother and I were the first ones to go to public school in our neighborhood as people of color, went to a Catholic school as people of color, and I didn't see other people of color until I went to Boston College High School. That's how long, give you an idea how long it took for me to interact with other people that don't look like an Irish or Italian, essentially, in the city of Quincy. To put in perspective how much the city has changed since I was a child. And one of the things that Grace points out is correct. The idea that families do not want to cause problems. Now, to put this in better perspective, imagine being a family not to cause problems when there's no one around you to look like you, and you're it. You're an easy target. You are out of line in the appearances. People always know where you are. You have an unusual name. Pretty self-explanatory there. And we didn't dress like everybody else. We didn't have the same lunches. I didn't know what peanut butter and jelly was for many years, which I actually ended up desiring. And it's pretty tough when you're isolated and you're alone and you don't fit in and you're desperately trying to figure out how to do that. Well, there's expectation from your family to behave like a good Chinese family does, despite what the rest of society's demanding from you to be part of their society. So as a result, I have quite of a different experience where I was never part of a larger Chinese community and resulted in actually fairly degree of, I have to do this myself. Doesn't matter what it is, it's got to get done and it's got to be done on our own, whether it's a family or an individual. And I lost my father when I was 15 to cancer. And, we had a very small support network, but none of them were family. Because we are not what you see a large immigrant family coming together at once. So, I made my way through school and whatnot, and discovered I enjoyed politics and got into it through college. And through the opportunity that Michael Morrissey gave to me when he was a senator, I got to learn up and close the challenges of Asian Americans in state government as one of two Asian Americans that worked in the state Senate at the time, and I believe 1 in 3 in the entire state house back in the mid-90s. And, through there, I learned a lot of different things about how people perceive Asian Americans. For example, when we're doing gun control one year, the DA doesn't know this story. When we're doing gun control one year, I took a lot of constituents' requests on behalf of the DA the senator back then. And we're sitting in a room and I'm talking to this guy by myself, and we discussed the importance of personal safety. And I asked him, well, do you think I'm a threat? And he goes, well, I don't know if you know Kung Fu, but I certainly need my gun if you do. So needless to say, I keep the door open whenever I have meetings with people, or I'm never there alone anymore. And this was one of the many instances that, dealt with the city of Quincy, for example. When I was a child, we called 911, no one ever came. The chief, and it's called probably shocked to hear that, but that was the norm. Your house is vandalized. No one came to help you. And if you read the Patriot Ledger reports back from the 1989 edition, they document a large number of cases up in North Quincy. Has times changed? Well, if no one's here to help you, no one heard you scream, it's hard to go back to ask for help again, because why would you? And this is what government needs to get done. to that end, we have the Massachusetts Asian American Commission. It's the first commission in the state that's targeted towards a specific ethnic group. I was a chair, Grace Lee was a chair, and interestingly enough, it was a bill filed by Michael Morrissey to make this happen. Another interesting story of that is that I won't name names because they're still around, but there were folks in the State House who actually tried to keep this commission from being funded by law. And thanks to the efforts of then Senator Morrissey and me working for him, we were able to keep that from happening. And today we're able to fund Mass Asian American Commission like any other state agencies. So that continues to be a very disturbing thing. I have to go fight, to ensure that we get equal representation in government. And this continues to be a recurring theme of my life in government, that we have to fight for equal treatment, not just with the people, Caucasian white population. We have to fight for equal treatment among other people of color. And Asian Americans who are listening to this knows exactly what I'm talking about. Today, we are the largest demographic bloc in the House of Representatives. Asian Americans have 8 there. In 2010, there were none. 2021, there are 8 Asian Americans. We are the largest ethnic bloc in the House of Representatives right now. And we're learning to get along with each other like all people that work together. And this is historic. But when you talk about which is the largest ethnic group in politics in the House of Representatives, Asians do not come first to mind. And people were still very surprised when I got elected there was no Asians before, because they were out of sight, out of mind. And even now, even as an elected official, I tell folks, there are some things you have to tolerate a little more than others. But the continuous reminder that you're not from around here is something that happens over and over again about where you're born. Your English is really good. I have flew Boston going all the time. I don't know how they not realize my English isn't good. It's Boston, not just plain English. And, we're here to listen. We're here to advocate. And given the tragedy in Atlanta, we did bring this to the Speaker's office about things we can do. And I understand some of the Speaker staff is listening on the call as well. Some of my other colleagues in the legislature who did not tell me they were going to be here, I'm sure they're on there as well, including some of the members of the Asian caucus. So a little bit more than 2 minutes, but I think people should know that I actually can relate to the stories being told, and so can Grace. And but at the same time, we still think it's very, very important for each of us here to also continue to listen to what we have today, so we have a sense of what has changed and has not changed in our society.
Thank you, State Rep Chan. So next one, can we go to Police Chief in Dover, Peter McGrawan?
Yes, thank
Hey,
you.
Peter.
I'm pleased to represent the town of Dover and the Norfolk County Chiefs of Police Association. I can confidently say that each of the 28 cities and towns have a great relationship with the district attorney and his staff. Collectively, our commitment to guaranteeing the rights of all of our agent residents is a top priority, and we welcome any requests for information or assistance. I've provided a list of civil rights officers for each of our departments, and it'll be available at some point during this presentation. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Chief. The next one, can we go to Needham Police Chief? John, I cannot say your last name, so I'm sorry for that. I apologize for that.
No, either can the DA. He never gets it right, so it's a tough one. I understand. I thank you to DA Morrissey for putting this together, to our panelists and guests. It's an honor to be here to speak to you. I want to let you know that law enforcement, we understand what's going on nationally and right here in our own backyard. And we understand it's extremely troublesome and frightening to us all. But I want you to know that we are here for you and we stand with you. We want to hear from you. We want you to come to us with any types of issues that you do have. We have a great relationship with the District Attorney Morrissey and his staff, and we'll work collaboratively to manage the issue and to find the resources to help you and to pursue criminal solutions. We also want you to look out for your family and your friends. If you know someone that's having an issue or might be a victim of a civil rights violation, let the police department in your town know, because all the chiefs and departments in the area have great relationships, and we can reach out to those departments and make the connection and work on getting the resources needed to help those individuals. We want you to know that, we want to be part of the solution. And as part of that, we don't want you to have to wait to come to the station or to call us after a negative incident. Feel free to stop by and meet some of our staff, create some relationships early on. And I think that's a huge benefit to us all. And we welcome that. But the main message is we want you to come to us. We are here for you, and we will do everything we can to support you for no matter what the incident is. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. So the next one, Chief Keenan from Quincy, the county's largest population center and largest population of Asian American.
Good evening, all. Good evening, all my colleagues in government. And thank you, DA Morrissey, for planning and hosting this very important and timely event. I think with all the unrest that's going on around the country, it couldn't be more timely. Thankfully, I'm the chief of the Quincy Police Department. I have been for the last 13 years. I've been a Quincy police officer for 38 years in the city of Quincy. When I first started in the city of Quincy 38 years ago, the Asian population was very, very small. And I'm pleased to say that that's grown and keeps growing over the years. And we welcome our Asian residents, our Asian citizens. They're tremendous community partners. They're tremendous neighbors. And we support you 100%. I'd just like you to know on behalf of the Quincy Police Department that we are, as some of my colleagues have said, we're there for you. We're constantly there for you. I know sometimes that, with the cultural differences that we have, sometimes there's a little bit of a fear in coming forward with the police because of the authority status that we have. But I can assure you that anytime that you need the police officers, Quincy Police will be there for you. You can feel comfortable coming to meet with us, speak with us, to report any crime or anything that happens to you. We're there to listen. We'll work with you. We will charge any kind of crime or criminal activity to the fullest extent of the law. We work very well with the district attorney's office. Thankfully, we don't have an awful lot of hate crimes in Quincy, especially with our Asian residents. But when we do, we take it very, very seriously. We work hand in hand with the DA's office to make sure those responsible are charged to the fullest extent of the law. We also, unfortunately, with the COVID situation, we haven't been able to do as much outreach as we would like to, and we have in the past. That will change once this pandemic is behind us. We will do an awful lot more outreach to our residents and our citizens in the form of community meetings. I know we had one of our crime prevention officers, Lieutenant Dan Mitten, just retired fairly recently. He was very, very big in Asian outreach with the Asian population to make sure that they knew they were supported. There were also a lot of target hardening and crime prevention activities. And we just want you to know that we're there for you. We'll continue to be there for you and support your community.
Thank you, Chief Keenan. So we have Chief from Wellesley. Chief.
You can't pronounce my name either, can you?
I'm trying. Let me try it. Palaki?
Yeah, very good. So
Yeah.
my name is Jack Pilecki. I am the police chief here in Wellesley. Thank you, District Attorney Morrissey, for having me. And this is, again, it's a great forum that you put together. I just want to mention two things. One, I want to reiterate what my fellow chiefs have said. The police department really can't do anything if we don't know about an incident. It's very, very important for you if you are involved in a racial incident or anything to come forward to the police department so that we can investigate it. Here in Wellesley, and I think my brothers in other departments will do the same thing, even if there's not a crime, we are still going to investigate it if it's a racial incident. We recently had a situation here in Wellesley where two Asian Americans were walking down the street and a woman, verbally accosted them, and they came forward. They told us. We actually located that woman. Now, there was no charge that we could charge her with, but she got the message that what she did was wrong. The other thing I want, so again, remember, it's important to go to the police department. The other thing I want to mention here in Wellesley, one of the things that we're doing, we're putting together we're calling it a rapid response team. So what we're doing is looking for community members of all ethnicities and religions to form this team. And the purpose of this team will be to render any assistance, aid, comfort, whatever we can do to victims of these types of crimes. Natick actually has one, they're called the Freedom Team. Wellesley will be called the Wellesley Freedom Team. And these teams are coming up in a lot of different towns in the state. But town of Wellesley takes it very seriously. We're doing what we can to help our residents in any way possible. So again, please, if there's something that happens, come see us.
Thank you, Chief. So before we go to the open floor and Q&A, I also want to acknowledge Dedham Chief Michael Detriment, Franklin Deputy Chief Mill, Cohasset Lieutenant Lopes. Thank you so much for joining us.
And Philip, if I could say, I know my friend Counselor Ian Mahoney from Quincy is also listening to the YouTube version as well.
Hey, Ann. So we have lots of good stories and questions since we announced the forum. So if you want to raise your questions to the audience, the panels, share your stories, feel free to raise your hand. There's a raise hand button. And one of my co-hosts will help to set you up for speaking at the forum. So, but first, before we're allowing live audience to speak, we got so many questions, and we want to raise some of the questions and have the panelists to answer some of the, in terms of protocol, in terms of what's the right approach. So we have a question from Jessica, Brookline resident. So she is asking questions that when facing racist behaviors toward Asian or in general, what is allowed within law? Can we take videos? Should we call right away? I think Chief from Wellesley actually brought some of good points. Chief from Wellesley, do you want to address that?
Oh,
John, or the
I'll answer this, Brookline callers. No, we definitely.
Sure.
Yeah. So I would definitely want you to call the police right away. Basically, the sooner we can start the investigation, the better off that we have is solving it. Also, we want to report because we want to be able to confront the suspects, because we want to make sure that they know that this behavior is not going to be tolerated, and they won't feel emboldened and do it to somebody else. So that's the biggest thing. As far as you need to contact us right away. We can make an assessment of the facts, see what we have as far as investigative leads, try to get a suspect. If there's a crime, we'll definitely charge the person in court. The Morrissey's team will take it from there. And as far as we'll see what we can do as far as making sure that this person is held accountable for those crimes, but definitely contact us right away.
And Chief Morgan, second question, since you're speaking, answering questions. So we have some concerns raised by the residents about the police authority image, and also the big number of Asian population in Brookline. What is the approach from the Brookline police in terms of the Asian liaison? Do you have a dedicated role to liaise with the Asian community in Brookline, and what's the strategy for that?
So we have Officer Nick Goon, who is assigned to the Community Service Division, who is basically does a variety of things. He does crime stats. He's involved with some of the Asian outreach. But like I said, we have 9% of our officers of AAPI. So as far as if it seems like it would be appropriate for them to answer the call or do the call, we try to make them available. Otherwise, we take the call in from the receiving officer. A detective, the civil rights officer would follow up on it. But as far as if we think, like I said, we have officers speak Mandarin, Cantonese, and Japanese. So if this seems like that would be a better route, we'd make those officers available, right at that time, so we could make sure that we could get the story, correctly and quickly. And so, but as far as we don't have a dedicated liaison officer at this time, we have them staffed throughout all three shifts.
Thank you. Anytime. Yep. Go ahead.
Just our friend Senator John Keenan from Quincy just sent me a little note. He's also on Zoom as well. I know we invited a number of Tackey and his men and women who served in the legislature with him have been invited, and we may miss some. So I just wanted to apologize if that happens. But I know that there are many people in the legislature who are also interested in what is going on with the Asian community. And many of them have joined us tonight as well. Besides some of the chiefs and others that may not be on the panel, I know that Chief McGowan put the word out to everybody in the county. So you'll find a good smattering of other people listening in as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Senator John Keenan. So we have another questions from Jean Lee, a resident from Quincy. So the question, there's 6 questions. So Chief Keenan, you better ready. So similar questions about the Quincy has the largest Asian population, about whether we have an Asian liaison from the local government or from the police department. And any hate crime, anti-hate crime laws. And then also, what is the, do we have a community affairs department in the police department? So maybe those 2 questions first.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a number of Asian officers that represent all different dialects and backgrounds. They're assigned to different areas in the police department. We have community policing covered, detectives, patrol, canine. Actually, one of our Asian officers is a canine officer who's been with the department for a long time. We also have a designated civil rights officer who's a lieutenant that works out of a detective bureau. He would normally do any kind of hate crime investigation and bring charges forward. As far as community outreach, the mayor's office also has a number of different people that work out of the mayor's office that advocate for our Asian community. We do a lot of outreach with our community police officer, Officer Mar. So we're pretty much well-rounded and well-covered throughout the department as far as servicing the Asian community or the community in general, as far as that goes. So I don't know if it's a designated officer in particular, but we do have a number of officers that do different things within the department that service the community.
Thank you so much. So another question, this question is to anyone on the panels that are wanting to take it. Why do you, it's from a resident in Brookline. Why do you think there's a lack of awareness and support for the Asian American community in comparison to the other POC minority groups, people of color, if people don't know about that? So again, the question is, why do you think there's a lack of awareness and support for the Asian American community in comparison to other people of color minority groups?
I'll take that one.
Sure.
So in my lifetime of doing this stuff, one of the real challenges is lack of education about Asian Americans. As Grace has pointed out, a series of facts I'm gambling the majority you've never heard of. Regarding everything from legal cases to the fact that we've been here for about 150 plus years. And for example, most people don't know that Chinese and other Asians weren't allowed to be US citizens to 1951. That's even if you were born in the US. So we're one of the last groups to actually achieve citizenship status, and it wasn't until after World War II. And I'm sure some of you are thinking, well, that's not true. You'd be surprised at how we're put at the end of the line regarding racial issues overall. And my friends have always explained to me that it's kind of a binary issue. If you don't fit in one category or the other, you don't fit at all. So some of the ways we can battle this is actually better education about the histories of Asian Americans, accomplishments, as well as discrimination against these various groups. And also to learn about the complexity of our different ethnic groups. I mean, there's about 50 plus different Asians from in the world, as well as probably well into 100 languages and dialects and dozens of different religions. We have a trouble that people put us in a monolith. And it's extremely difficult for me to explain the differences and the challenges of every different Asian group to folks. And it's part of the education process it seems I'm always doing, not just in the community, but also in government.
Thank you. Anyone want to add, Grace?
If I could just add, I
Yeah.
think, yeah, as Tackey was saying, this is a very complex issue, and I identified it as part of the problem is the stereotypes of Asian Americans being clumped as one group, and the status of being a perpetual foreigner, notwithstanding the fact that we've had Chinese here since the 1800 building the railroads. When you are perpetually, pigeonholed as a foreigner, that automatically attaches a baggage of you're not as worthy of US protection, rights, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, you are the foreigner. So that stereotype is particularly insidious because what it also does is it no longer lends yourself to having a seat at the table. Part of that is the elimination of and complete absence of any Asian American history within our educational system. When we talk about, celebration of diversity, we're happy and we gloriously celebrate and embrace Lunar New Year, but nobody even knows about the Chinese Exclusionary Act. Nobody understands Korematsu, U.S. versus Korematsu. That's a race-based analysis, during World War II. Based on Japanese American, Chinese American, all of this rich history, because we've been here, as a group since the 1800s, absolutely eliminated. So if you don't have that context, and I was actually talking to, I sit on the Massachusetts Business Roundtable, and I studied, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Some of this education is going to happen in our workforce, because I'm going to be honest, when we were taught things, our history books were very, very skinny. I listened to some of the things that my children are learning about. I had none of that. And even with the rich curriculum that they have now, it still is drastically anemic when it comes to Asian American history. In order to actually include people in a dialogue, you have to actually attach to them the value and the contributions in the context of our collective history. So it's not just Asian American history, this is our history. So that is one very, insidious reason why we're left out of that dialogue. And again, to those of you in law enforcement, this is a very complex issue. When you have people of color kind of jockeying for positions for attention, this is a very, very complex issue that people of color are going to have to address, discuss, and heal from in our own communities. So, when we're left out, part of it is the model minority myth. Asians want to be quiet, just do your job. And that's what happened post World War II. So there's a lot of reasons why we're left out of that dialogue. But, venues like this, elected officials like Tackey Chan, advocates like Philip, these are all ways to make sure things change as we go forward.
Thank you, Grace. So we have a participant, Jeremy Barisa. So Jeremy reached out to us earlier and raised a couple of questions and also his story. Jeremy, can you unmute yourself and then ask your questions and also share the stories that you sent to us earlier?
Yeah, thank you. I don't really want to take a lot of time with the story, but I would like to ask the question asked, which I also posted in the Q&A, which is that when the QPD Quincy Police Department posted this event on their Facebook page, a lot of the responses to the post were racist. Many simply just denied that the problem exists. And I'd like to ask Chief Keenan, how does this make him feel that this is the response from the community when they try to do something positive like this?
I always, when we look at our Facebook page and we post something on Facebook in general, I always take it with a grain of salt. It's unfortunate that everyone's entitled to their opinion, but people that sometimes are misguided or whatnot have an opportunity to vent on various social media platforms. So it is kind of discouraging. We try and make our message positive. We keep things positive as best we can. We try and mitigate the negative as much as we can, but it is kind of discouraging when you do see that. And I did notice there were a couple of posts that were, kind of troubling.
If I could, Philip, I just say that when we I mentioned earlier when we were talking, Grace and I was giving poor Grace a hard time because Tackey wasn't here yet, that, I have grown up in the city as the chief has, and I was seeing the change, and a lot of it we took for granted because our friends and neighbors. I mean, I've learned a lot from Tackey. I can remember him coming to me and asking me to file the bill for the Asian Commission. I really didn't give it a second thought when Tackey said, well, there are different groups that have voices, but, we're a pretty big part of this community and pretty big part of the state. And we want to have that kind of voice. And, I didn't think much of it until, Tackey spent a lot of time educating a lot of people when we worked together in the State House. And I think that effort continues now. That I think the fruits are starting to come to bear, at least in the State House, where there's the largest group of Asian Americans elected to the legislature in years. But in Quincy, the chief, and I needed some chiefs, I went to the largest communities in the county that have the largest populations, and all the chiefs stepped up right away. And Chief Keenan, of course, he was the first person I had to go to because I grew up in the community, and he has the largest group. He said, absolutely. So I can't say that, none of us, we all have a lot of problems we have to deal with. And one of the ways, this is just one small step of us trying to discuss and learn about the problems people face. And yeah, we're going to have problems. I mean, people criticizing all of us for doing this. Well, so what? You're going to have to listen to us now too, because we want to listen to your problem. If they want to get on and criticize all of us, have at it, because we're not going away. We want to hear what people have to say. So I just want to thank all the chiefs in particular for stepping up right away. And we're going to ignore the people who have bad things to say. I agree with the chief. Absolutely.
Thank you, Michael. Chief Keenan, you're popular. You have lots of questions to you. I'm going to raise this to you. So on the Q&A, questions to Chief Keenan. 30% of the residents in Quincy are Asians. Do you have any plans to increase the diversity of the Quincy Police Department to reflect this?
We actually do try. We're a civil service community, which means we're limited as far as who we can get, who we can take. What happens is anyone that's interested in being a police officer, they take a civil service exam. It's a written exam, 80 questions or 100 questions. The results are scored, and then a list is developed. And it's very difficult to sometimes get through the list to get to Asian residents. We just recently have hired, we actually had a few more, a couple of them have had a great long career in the city of Quincy and retired, happily retired. And then we just actually in the last group of offices, we just actually hired an Asian female. So we do try, but we are kind of handcuffed a little bit, to coin the phrase, handcuffed a little bit in our hiring and efforts because of the civil service rules and regulations and the list that they follow. However, I think this time around, we're going to do an awful lot more as far as Facebook and encouraging people, not just of Asian descent, but other people to try and take the exam. I think that the numbers are going down statewide as far as offices or people that are interested in becoming officers on police departments. So we're going to do a little bit more outreach with social media and try and do a little bit more recruiting than we've done in the past. But the short answer is, yeah, I would love to have more officers that are male or female that are Asian.
Thank you, Chief Keenan. Thank you, Jeremy. Jeremy, you all set? You have other questions?
That's good. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. So next person, Christina. Christina, before you ask your questions, unmute yourself, please.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I didn't realize there was a Q&A, but I believe someone else asked this question as well, more specifically towards the smaller towns. I know Brookline mentioned they're diverse, but what are police officers doing, within yourselves that you're educating your officers on this? I'm from Needham, where there is a large Asian population here. But the police force is not as diverse. And I don't want to get into it, but I've had interactions with police officers where, they don't know how to handle racism and attacks. And, in my situation, I was personally attacked and I called the police and they just told me to stay quiet. Going forward, what what are you guys doing to educate your own within the force to protect the community when this arises?
Thank you, Christina.
I can take a stab at that. Police departments throughout the Commonwealth and throughout the country, for the most part, are really in the process of stepping up their training. Here in Wellesley, and along with other police departments throughout the Commonwealth, we're doing anti-bias training. In Wellesley, we just did an empathy training so that our officers can put themselves in the shoes of the people that they're dealing with, so that they have a better understanding of what that victim is going through. There's a lot more to be done, but there is a lot of training that's available, and quite frankly, sometimes it's a money issue. COVID hasn't helped much at all. I mean, our training is way behind because, quite honestly, training in person is much better than training, doing a course over the internet. So we are trying to improve our training in all kinds of different areas.
Christina, it's Michael Morrissey. It's funny you should say that. As the district attorney, I take the heart that if someone who works for me may not be doing the job that you think they should, or ignoring something that's important, I usually tell them the fact that, you know, I don't want to get that call. You have police chiefs here tonight that I would tell you they're all cut out of the same cloth. I mean, if you're unhappy with the services and what you're getting in the community, there isn't one of them that wouldn't take a call. And that and arguably they want to make sure, you know, they work for you. That's why they're here tonight, is that they want to listen as well. So I think if you ran into that kind of situation and it's something that can be corrected, these are the people at the top of the food chain that know how to get things done. So that's why I reached out to them, because they have been willing. They work with us quite closely, and I know that they are sympathetic to our constituents.
DA, if I could just add quickly, this Chief Slutler from Needham. Obviously, if that is something that was happened in Needham, I'm definitely available for a phone call or conversation about that. That is not how our officers are trained. That is not the response that I would expect from any police officer in the Commonwealth, Norfolk County. And I echo the sentiments of the Wellesley Police Chief that we have started a lot of training on racial profiling, anti-bias, implicit bias. And that has become a real focal point of some of the things we do, just not from Needham Police Department training or local training, but from a state level, and the mandatory training that we see during in-service through the Mass Police Training Council. So it's definitely a focal point. And if that's something that you want to connect and have a discussion on, I'm available to talk at any time.
Christina?
Thanks, I appreciate that. And I'll definitely reach out to the chief of Needham. And also I'm learning too. I did not realize I had as many options as I do until this call tonight. So thank you.
Thank you, Christina. So next questions. This is questions to State Rep Chen. It's from Nathan Pham. There are pockets of Asian communities in various parts of the state beyond the greater Boston areas, beyond Quincy, etc. Do you feel that their Asian community voices are heard by the elected officials that represent them, or rather, do they even speak up? How do you advise us to help educate them on the importance of civic participation and empower them in the public policy process?
The answer, Nathan, is no. I don't think every pocket of Asian Americans around the state are represented. For example, I didn't know there was a population of Bhutanese, people from Bhutan. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, because I'm not always getting that terminology correct myself. But I mean, people from Bhutan live in the Amherst area. And we have Sri Lankans spread around the state as well, and a pocket of Cambodians down in the Fall River area. that I didn't know about. So I think one of the challenges we have is actually seeing the people we represent, like actually recognizing we see them in our neighborhoods. And then the second part of the question regarding outreach and education, I mean, people know if I can drive there, I'll get there. I've done that a few times as a member of the Asian American Commission. And now as an elected official, I didn't realize, honestly, didn't realize when I first got elected how many other non-Chinese groups reached out to me to tell me about their problems. And I've always been trying my best to go out to wherever they like to, and I'll sit and listen and see if we can find some solutions. But the answer is, I believe they're heavily underrepresented. I do not believe the communities they live in understand how to engage them. And again, it's the overall lack of education. And like the DA said, I'm the same philosophy that government's job is go to you, not the other way around. You shouldn't expect government to come to you to accommodate people working government. Government should accommodate the people that they work for. And this is kind of the onus that's been put on Asian Americans that aren't done with other ethnic groups. The expectation, as Grace pointed out, the perpetual foreigner means that our job is to help you out, not the other way around. And this is my experience in government through my life in Quincy, and now also in the state level, and obviously watching this in the federal level. That opening up barriers like linguistic access, addressing bias issues, a better job in hate crimes, education, the school system, all these other things, and most importantly, dispelling the model minority myth. The model minority is the single thing that kills us with everybody, because it gives the incorrect impression that we don't have any problems. Oh, the kid's silent. Well, why is the kid silent? Well, the kids are hard working, can solve themselves. But I mean, the child could be suffering kind of trauma. Grace pointed out the Japanese internment camp issue. If you've been in an internment camp in the United States as a US citizen for 6 years or more, you don't think that causes trauma when you leave the system? Do you want to talk to law enforcement? These are real things that you kind of like, oh, well, internment camps. Yeah, but you weren't in one. So you come out of an internment camp for 6 years. You're telling your kids and your grandkids don't cause a problem. You don't want to go back to an internment camp. Same thing of immigration issues. You have people that are detained that eventually become U.S. citizens. They're definitely afraid of what will happen next if you do something wrong. The fear of deportation, which leads to things like domestic violence as well, which means greater education about what your rights are. And most recently, not to get on too much of a tangent, but I learned that folks that are here on HB1 visas, green card visas, are subject to a higher level of abuse and also inequity in getting paid, because again, they are trapped to a system that doesn't recognize them as, even if they're here in a visa, recognize them as people. They should give you even treatment as everybody else. And people don't kind of think that. They assume you have a high income H1 visa, oh, you're all set. No, they should be treated the same as fair as anybody else in this country. So, I think there needs to be some effort for a government to look around them and see who are living there and ask that strong question. Shouldn't we be serving them too? The taxpayers, the residents here, and there's always the argument, taxpayer, no representation. You should be represented. You pay taxes. Back at old, Revolutionary War mentality of no taxation but representation. Well, it's pretty much that simple.
Thank you.
Philip, if I'm, having worked with Tackey for so many years, and Chief Keenan and I have actually grown up in the community, we've seen the change. One of the things that I think that has served us well, before you became the director of QARI, QARI was really there's a much smaller group of Asian Americans in Quincy when Tackey and a group of people got together. And I think that we've been fortunate in the Quincy area to have people like QARI. I think that helps sell some of the representation, the problems that we learned from groups like QARI, not just individuals, because you're able to corral different segments of the Asian population in Quincy, the business people. Tackey reminds me that Quincy, Weymouth, Braintree, Milton, and Randolph, we have the largest concentration of Asian businesses in the Commonwealth, and never really thought much of it until Tackey beat me over the head. So having people, that like QARI, I think that's really been a real boon to us. I know that they're very active in Brookline and Wellesley and Needham. And Needham had a demonstration the other night. People are starting to pay attention. And when you have those groups coming together, I think it helps some of the needs and identify some of the needs of the people. So, I mean, I know we're only starting with a small section of the county, and maybe we can do this again in other areas, but I think you should take a little pat on the back, Philip, for the work that was done even before you got there.
We definitely should. I mean, personally, I came from private sector, so it was a new territory to me when I first joined QARI 4 years ago. But I learned so much. It's still a learning process. But what I observe and what I learn is for the nonprofits and social services, there's so many great organizations, there's so many groups that we all doing the great cause for the people. We should work together. I think we should definitely work together, like meaningful work together. I think that is something that I want to see in the community, because there's so many great people in great group, and we should be more laser focused on prioritizing our resources, because we know that there's always limited resources. So for nonprofits, definitely there's a change, and then we're so grateful to working with all of you here. And I'm sorry, I'm resident in Quincy. I'm resident in Brookline, but I work in Quincy. I love Quincy. Chief Keenan, I know. I'm planning to move there, but my husband will kill me. So yes. My kids will kill me too. So the next question, we have Sharon Mann. Sharon sent us an amazing story. Sharon, are you here?
Yes, hi. Can you guys hear me well?
I'm hearing you well. How are you doing?
Good, thank you. Thank you guys for holding this forum tonight. I especially want to thank you, Philip, Chief Paul Keenan, and Representative Tackey, DA Mike Morrissey, and Grace Lee for being here.
Great. Sharon, go ahead.
Yeah, so basically, you know, I found this out on Facebook, and what I basically want, I don't have a question to ask. If anything, I just want to share my story, and what I want everybody to get out of this is happening in Massachusetts. This has definitely increased since COVID, and that we need to stand united and fight this racism against Chinese and Asian people. And I want people to know that as a bystander, if you see something, say something. If you see something, do something. Okay. And what I'm going to share to you is what happened to me and what I learned from it, basically. And this was very recent. This actually happened to me in New York City. Was the first incident. That was February 20th of this year. We were having ice cream with the family, basically an all-female group, 3 adults, 6 children. A man came around the corner while we were eating ice cream, accidentally make eye contact with my minor child and said, "What the fuck are you looking at, chink?" And no one came to my help. Of course, I stood up for myself, I stood up for my child, but what happened was the nastiest, most confrontational, and like racially laced verbal confrontation that almost became physical. And this is a grown man, basically verbally attacking a child. You know, someone that's she's unarmed, she's harmless, and they're basically considered easy targets right now. You know what I mean? And there's strength in numbers. And that day I found out it was such a long confrontation. No one called the police, first of all. People whipped out their phones to start videoing like it was the circus. And then it was unbelievable. It ended with him picking up a chair, which caused me to pick up a chair because he was going to hit me with it. But then folks came out from the ice cream shop to separate the situation and take the chair back. And then one of the male family members who was parking the car came back, and he basically stopped the situation. And then police showed up afterwards. And I was very disappointed to find out that police in New York said that it was not a hate crime, that there was nothing they could charge him with. And basically, we said, take our names, we'll give a report, blah, blah. And everything was minimized, and we were told we can't make a report and that they didn't need our information. So that was that. And for everybody to understand, I felt very helpless as a mother and very vulnerable, because I knew that day, if people didn't come to stop this, I would have gotten hit. You know what I mean? And I'm not that big. I'm not that big, honestly. This guy easily had half a feet on me. You know what I mean? So it puts you in a bad situation. And so that's what happened and what ensued on February 20th. But then March 9th, Chinatown, Boston, 2.5 weeks after my first incident, you know, trying to protect my children. I'm there in Boston at my favorite Chinese restaurant, you know, we're in line ordering food. The man in front of me wasn't paying any attention. So I just said, oh, you're next. So what ensued was, F you. And then I hate Chinese people, and all these Chinese things started coming out of his mouth. I'm like, oh my God, out of me saying, you're next. So of course I had to defend myself, and I started shouting. You know, I started shouting that he was a racist. And then with all that, it ended. No one called 911, but I was grateful because there was one bystander, a gentleman came up to me afterwards and said he had my back the whole time. He was only passing by. He wasn't even in line for this Chinese. And that time it made me feel less alone, less vulnerable, because there's strength in numbers, you know what I mean? There's strength in numbers. And that's why I say, you know, comparing the New York incident to the Massachusetts incident, it's see something, say something. See something, do something. If you see a fellow bystander, a fellow Asian, and honestly, you know, just a person, an elderly person being picked on or, you know, racially slammed with verbal assault, or child, you know, by a grown man, do something. It could be as simple as call 911, you know, and I understand nowadays, you know, everybody's video happy, whip out your phone and start videoing, but, you know, and start recording, and that's how you get good evidence. But there's no evidence to be given to anybody if you don't call 911 first. You know what I mean? So I just want people to understand out there, you know, as a bystander, what to do and what I would be grateful for as an Asian American, as if I'm by myself and I'm in such a vulnerable position, just stand by me. Just stand by me so you can help me socially disarm this person. If one other person said, hey, stop that, you're being a racist, and backed me up, we could have socially disarmed them together. And that's what I really wanted to get across, that these incidents are real. It's happening in the now. It has increased because in my life, I've had plenty of racial incidents. But as a grown woman, this is the first time I really thought I was going to get punched in the face. So, I mean, that's pretty bad from a mother of 4 kids. You know what I mean? It put me in a, and that's why I chose to speak out today, because normally I'm definitely typical Asian. I'm not going to like come out and speak out in a forum, you know, and garner attention. That's just not me. You know what I mean? But because of everything that's going on, I think people need to be educated that this is real. You can't say, oh, it doesn't happen. Oh, not in Quincy. Oh, not in Boston. It's just New York. It's just San Francisco. It's not. It's here. It's now. And I want our brothers and sisters, you know, whether you're Asian, Chinese, Black, white, you know, if you're supporting this cause, please stand by us. If you see something, say something.
Thank you. That's very brave of you. Thank you for the message. Appreciate your story.
And Philip, City Councilor Charles Phelan, who's actually Tackey City Council, represents a good portion of the Asian population in Quincy and Wellesley. He's also been listening. He just sent me a note. So there's a lot more people out there that I think that are listening than we think there are too. So
thank you, Councilor Phelan.
Can I just say, Sharon, first, you're my hero. So thank you for sharing, because I think that is real. I'm gonna be really, I'm gonna be really authentic right now, because yesterday, after I read about the mother that got punched with their 7-year-old child, Skylar, my daughter and I went, and this is in Brookline, we went to go, walk to CVS, and I actually was concerned, and I had her walk on the inside of the street, and I actually had my phone, and I was playing out like, okay, if this happens, what am I going to do? So, the problem, as I indicated before, with hate crimes is it creates a fear throughout the entire community, because there's nothing that you can do about your race. I just want to give a huge shout out to Chief Pilecki, because I think you originally started with, even if it's not a crime, we're going to pay that person a visit. And that is so incredibly powerful. And that was the philosophy, I followed as a prosecutor. I'm like, I may not get a conviction, but I will absolutely drag you to court every single day and make you go through the entire process, because charging it as such sends a huge message to the larger community. So, and I know because, and that was back in the day, our Norfolk County, law enforcement agency. You know, if that New York incident, if that would have happened in Norfolk County, they would have got charged with disorderly conduct. I tried and lost cases worse than that. So I feel like Sharon, I know these police chiefs have your back, and you know, I'm with you, sister.
Thank you, Grace. I think it's a good segue. We have a question from Susanna Lee, Dr. Susanna Lee from Brookline. The question to the legislators here. This is what she's saying. To me, any protection for AAPI community must come from the legislature. We need help. Will there be any change in the law to help the AAPI, who are the minority among minorities? We have always been law-abiding citizens as we have faith in the law of the land. Please don't fail us now.
Tackey?
Well, since I'm the only legislator that's allowed to unmute, I guess that leaves it to me. Ultimately, I tell folks passing laws are wonderful, but it's still down to implementation law and trust in government. So if we pass any law, if you don't trust the people implementing the law and you don't understand the law, it can be very difficult. For example, people don't realize there's a law in the books that you can be issued a ticket for leaving your car idle for more than 15 minutes. Most of you don't know that. I know a lot of crazy little law trivia, but do you expect that to be enforced? And I'm not expecting the chiefs to answer that. But this is kind of a very simple example. One of the things I brought up to Black Latino Caucus chair was the fact that the first study on wireless drivers and who got warnings for using a handheld device, not handless, so the hand-free driving law. Caucasians predominantly got a warning, while Blacks, Latinos, and Asians got cited. The Asians actually got a higher citation than Blacks and Latinos by 4 points. It wasn't a massive number, but the media immediately kind of brushed it over as a non-issue. One of the challenges we have is that the media doesn't pay attention to us. And until Atlanta happened, Grace went through a whole litany of horrors around the country. And until, API hate came along and doing surveys going past the last February, the number of incidents people didn't think too much about, even though some of us have been paying a little more attention on local news or whatnot. Are we working on something? I've spoken to the speaker. We do have an interest in doing something relative to anti-Asian hate. What exactly? I don't have an answer for you. And one of the challenges of being me and not looking for your sympathy, when things go wrong, they all come to me to find out if there's an answer we can do for Asian Americans. And I do not claim to have all the answers. I'm learning as I go, and every incident brings a new chapter of education that I'm now learning too, as well as my other colleagues. But I can promise you, the Asian Caucus and the House will definitely serve as a bridge between ourselves with the rest of the legislators in the community, trying to find some practical solutions that will actually make a difference in people's lives, or try to make a difference in as many people's lives as possible, as I like to say. I can't guarantee it's going to work out for everyone, but that's all I can tell you.
Thank you. So we have such a good discussion. I know everyone is tired. It's almost 8:30. So we're running 5 minutes overtime. So apologize for that. So we're gonna have last question from John Lynn. John, if you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Phil. I appreciate that. I joined a little late, so sorry dragging along. So a couple comments and one question. First comment is, I think this is outrageous, all the killing stuff. And I'm sitting on the boards for two Chinese American association in Needham and Dover Sherburne. And we are very, very angry with that. And one comment is we all need to band together, as Grace and the other lady say that. We all need to band together people who believe in the law, who trust in the law, whatever color, right? Like the police chief here and district attorney, people who believe in the Constitution, believe in the American ideal, band together not only Asians, blacks and whites all together, we're brother, sister. We need against this injustice. That's number one. Number two, like what Grace said, we really need to uphold the law and do more prosecution on these stuff, right? If we have a band together, we have, a larger voice, and then those bad guys are the minority. I believe that's still minority. This is America, all right? This is not other countries. So that's what I say. And then the third thing is, whatever the race, right? I came from China, 27 years ago. I'm a citizen for a long time, but I believe in the law and I will defend myself. That's last point is a lot of people right now looking at it say, we need to bear arms. We need to defend ourselves. It's not just bully, okay? We need to beat those bully back. So this is, you don't want that kind of things happen, but people have a right to defend themselves. So you understand that. I want a police chief here also understand. This is a human being defending himself or herself against an evil person, evil act, all right? So we all need to work together on this. So the only question I don't know if people ask about is, I know police maybe have some training. I just want to ask maybe one or two police chief can answer the last 20 seconds is what kind of anti-racist and diversity training you guys been doing that, and from those instances, what things you can learn to do more of that and a better job of that. So we're gonna work with you, right? And the police is our friends, our neighbors, protecting us. We're gonna work with you. Anything we can help you, but I just want to know what kind of training you have, or you do more of that. Thank you, Philip. Thank you, everybody on that. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Who wants to answer that question?
Well, I can start. This is actually some of the training that I consider this training tonight, by the way. And that they have a lot of people open. They have in-service training. You heard a little before, even the district attorney's office, we're doing more implicit bias and other training, trying to people to recognize situations, working with different groups. And even my friends in the legislature. I think this has been helpful. I'd like to do something like this again and broaden it to other members of the community. I know that Alice Price, speaking of Wellesley, was on as well. She dropped me a note. So I know I'm going to leave somebody out in the legislature, and they're very important people to all of us because, as Tackey said, sometimes you can't legislate morality, and we need to stick together to make sure people do the right thing. So laws are important, but enforcing them is even more important than having people that are willing to stand up. So we can all learn a lot. There's no doubt about it. And I think that the chiefs are committed to doing more training. And I know they mentioned that it's difficult to get training in COVID, but there's been some good things about COVID too, by the way. We've all learned how to use Zoom. And there's been some other training that has that we might not have been able to do as easily. It may not be as homey and folksy and warm and fuzzy, but there's some things that are going on that we're all making do with too. This is not my first choice of doing the forum this way, but we're doing a lot of different things too that people don't see.
Michael, your silver lining of COVID is a Zoom.
I don't know about that. We haven't cut too many people off, I hope. And I know that the court system, and one of the things we have found out very quickly, they'll probably not be happy with even saying this, but how deficient they have been in with technology and the problems we're running into prosecuting people has a lot to do with the inability of the courts to move ahead in a COVID situation. But that's for another forum and another date.
Yes. But definitely we see a lot of elders, Asian elders using the technology. So
let me bring up a little bit of a closer here.
Please.
I don't have as much tread on the tires as some of the other folks, and I definitely have more tread than Morrissey does in my life. But I will have to say, and Grace may agree or disagree with me on this, but I've never seen anti-Asian issues go this long and cross so many different socioeconomic sectors, including racial sectors, because of the nature of COVID. This is why this is a bit of a challenge for me on an educational level, because I'm used to seeing economic impacts like Japanese car industry, which victim Chin was victimized, which is a story, again, should be told in the history books about how you can get away with murder, literally murder, and walk away from it pretty much unscathed by the Justice Department. And, we've seen the instance after 9/11 where if you had brown skin, didn't matter where you came from in the world, you were attacked all over the country. And of course, we had the Indian incident of the Oklahoma stabbings of 2 Indians, and we had the Sikh massacre up in Minnesota that people either don't know or forgotten about. So these are, obviously other different Asian ethnic groups. But COVID is actually very different because of the wide range impacts it has on our lives and the easy scapegoat that's been created. I won't even say his name, but the guy we all know created the scapegoat. And it became easy for all the other groups to gather around and isolate the small group of folks who did absolutely nothing wrong. There is not a loss of people's jobs because of economic competitiveness. There is no world war. There is none of these other factors. COVID is actually very different from other anti-Asian issues, which have been stimulated by military conflict or economic competition. And this is why I'm having some myself grasping on this education about this particular instance of anti-Asian. What has developed is we saw in Atlanta, all these things that some people at home probably think about but never realized they thought about, which is completely racist and untrue. And the Atlanta commentary by the sheriffs and other folks down there really brought that to light. Now, whether you admit to that after listening to that is untrue and a racist comment, well, that's up to you to decide. But this is a very different period in history from my experiences, my observations over the years. And unfortunately, I hate to say this, but we're going to have to weather this out as Asian Americans a bit longer in the negativity associated with COVID.
Thank you. Thank you. So we have to wrap up. So first, I want to thank all the panelists. I want to thank DA office, DA Morrissey, all the chiefs, Grace Lee, State Rep Chan, Peter, and all the interpreters. Thank you so much. And most important, I think these things happen also for the technical part. I also want to thank David Trop from the DA office. He's been doing a tremendous job. But most importantly, I want to thank the participants, people who voice and speak up tonight to share their stories, to share their concerns, to share what really ruffled their feathers. That is the first step. That's important for you to voice your concerns. So also, before we leave tonight, I'm going to let Michael, I'm going to let you have the last word, but a lot of people asking us about the recording. So the recording for this forum will be posted on the QARI.org website later this week, and then also on the DA office Facebook page and the YouTube page. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to email info@quincyasianresources.org. On behalf of the board, on the staff at QARI in this city of Quincy and the Norfolk County, thank you so much for tonight. Michael, do you want to wrap it? Last word.
I thank everybody for me, so I won't go through that, but I'm most grateful for all the participants and the interpreters. I didn't fire David Traub. Everything went off pretty well, so that went pretty well. He still has a job tomorrow. And with Tackey, I just leave one thing to say, that we got together as kind of a group even before the tragic events in Atlanta, and we could always learn more. But before that, we had recognized that this is something that we wanted to be involved in. And, as tragic as Atlanta and some of the events that have gone on more recently, I think it just empowers us more to be able to work together and to speak out and move in the right direction. I think out of the, they say out of the fire, the phoenix, comes anew. And I think, we can move in the right direction. I know things are maybe in the Asian community doesn't feel that warm and fuzzy right now, but I think we can, if we stick together and work together, we can really make, this a better place to live. So I just want to thank everybody for participating.
Thank you so much. Thank you all. Have a good night.